Okay, next up we have Ben Greiner. Now, Ben is the president of Forget Computers in Chicago, who, as well as having the most amazing jackets out,
Thank you.
yeah, are insanely focused on elevating the power of teams using Apple technology and have been since 1998. Ben leads a team of Apple experts on a mission to transform IT delivery worldwide using the most intelligent tools, clear communication, compelling thought leadership and a positively fun attitude. So it's great for Ben to come all the way from Chicago here to present at XWorld. And it's your first time presenting at XWorld.
It is. Yeah.
You're going to be presenting Making Squanch Happen.
That's right. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ben.
Thank you, Marcus. And thank you for having me. And I'm just going to get right into this. How many people here know what I'm about to talk about? How many people here have seen Rick and Morty? A few people. Okay, so we need to set the stage. First of all, I wanted a creative talk, and I got that. Thank you very much. But what I didn't really think through is the first time a customer said to me, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And I envisioned them Googling this. And if you Google this, you're going to get some strange responses. So what this talk is really about is how, just to set the stage here, how to take all the cool stuff you're going to learn today and tomorrow and yesterday and get it out there. Because we all know that learning it here in this room or in our lab is relatively easy. With hard work and dedication, we can learn it. But when we get out there, it gets a bit messy. Because now we've got people involved.
Rick Sanchez, you psycho bag of squash!
Hey, what's up, Squanchy?
Hey, Squanchy. Morty, Summer, and you must be Beth. On Squanch, hey!
Your language has the word squanch in it a lot. Doesn't that become tedious and worn out like the Smurf thing?
Beth, Squanchy culture is more contextual than literal. You just say what's in your squanch and people understand.
Okay, so that sets the stage for what squanch is. And many of you have probably figured out now that I've given myself a lot of liberty to talk just about anything during this. But I am going to stay focused, and we are going to talk about something very specific. And the important part of setting the stage here is what happens next.
Oh, okay. I squanch my family. What? I do. I squanch my family.
Stop saying it, gross! Come on in, guys. The guests are having cock squanches.
Okay, so let's focus on Beth. And I feel like this is a good analogy for what happens with a lot of conversations I have with my customers or with other IT professionals. We think we're talking about the same thing, but we're not. We're not always doing that. And I'm not very good at reading faces, especially cartoon faces. So I asked my wife to help me figure out, in this case, exactly how Beth is feeling in this moment. And we decided together that she probably is confused, not feeling included, dismissed, talked down upon, shamed, inferior, maybe a bit squanchy. And these are all things that sometimes we don't mean to, but this is how we as IT people can come across to non-IT people, right? And that's not a good thing when that happens. It's not a good thing at all because people remember most how we made them feel, not just at work, but at home and in life. When you have interactions with people, they often remember not so much exactly what you said, but how you made them feel. In fact, this is how Microsoft made me feel when I had to call them recently. It was about an hour-long session, and I kept getting transferred. And these people were very polite, and they did their job properly, and they did the best that they could, but this is really how I felt. I just kept getting beat up over and over again. Every time they transferred me, I had to start over. So that's enough about the negative, because I'm going to try not to dwell on the negative, because the negative is easy. We can all do that. We all do that every day. In fact, here, we often share horror stories about things that happen to us. And it's much more difficult to talk about the positive. So we're going to get positive. And the way I want to start out getting positive is I want to walk through a positive day for IT. And IT is a generic term. We're going to use it in the broad sense. We all have different roles and different responsibilities. But a positive day for IT might be the first thing people think of when they wake up is, I can't wait to talk to IT today. It's going to be so much fun. I'm going to learn so much. This is going to be great. When we get to the office, there's a box of donuts waiting for us at our desk. You've seen the jam photo with the sticker that says, I heart IT. That's our box of donuts saying that they love us and they appreciate us. And maybe there's a phishing email, and we save the day. We stop this phishing email from ever happening because we're protecting our client base. Maybe there's an afternoon strategy session, not a meeting that says we have to get this done tonight before tomorrow, but an actual strategy session where we talk about what we're going to do 6, maybe 12 months out, and how we're going to get there, and how we're going to work together to make it happen. We go home early because we're that good at our job. And we get some squanch done. Good job, everyone. That was an awesome day. Now let's look at a positive day for everyone else outside of IT, outside of this room. IT does not exist. And not only does IT not exist, but our rainbow unicorn's not feeling too well. I forgot to mention part of that day is we ride in on the unicorn, dressed as our favorite superhero, riding an eco-friendly unicorn-powered scooter. So similar to, if you put yourself in the shoes, even within IT, I don't look forward to calling Microsoft again for support. And that's kind of the situation that a lot of people are in. They don't really look forward to engaging us, even though we would love for them to engage us sooner rather than later. The next time I have to call Microsoft, I'm going to think back to that time where they kept me on the phone for an hour and really punished me. So even within our own culture, whether you're IT or non-IT, this is not something that we envision. In fact, we do as much as we can to prevent people from calling us, right? Which is a good thing for them and a good thing for us. But we should really value those phone calls when we get them because it means people are engaging us. So how do we reconcile this difference between their view where we don't exist and our view being the hero? And I think we need to take a new approach to what we've been doing. And some people are already doing that and talking about that. Let's go into that a little bit more, because there are a couple things happening that are going to force our hand in changing whether we want to or not. And I've narrowed this down to three of the big changes as I see them. The first one is central cloud management, which is clearly here, although there's still some people not taking full advantage of it, but eventually I think we'll all be taking advantage of the power and the centralized resources of, rather than building it ourselves over and over and over again, we can just plug into this cloud system and get a lot more out of it. Automation, which is also huge. We've been pushing automation going on 10 years now, yet I continue to have conversations with people who are not automating. So if you're not automating, you got to start thinking about that. And then artificial intelligence, which I think is just now starting to hit some of us. It's still on the fringe, but it's around the corner. And what all of these have in common is that they require fewer people to do the work that we're doing today. So with fewer people, we need to start preparing for a different role, a more engaged role, and a role that I'll talk about in a minute. So if anyone is skeptical about AI replacing them, have you heard of Google's Alphago? I just learned about it myself. Their DeepMind project.
For decades, human beings have played games against computers. At first, computers struggled, but then they started winning.
Watson!
What is creed?
Yes.
And now they've become so dominant that they're raising doubts about the future of humanity. The latest emblem for existential dread is Google's DeepMind project, which created Alphago, an AI program that's become unbeatable at the most complex strategy game on the planet. While the game of checkers has 10 to the power of 20 possible outcomes, and a game of chess has 10 to the power of 40 possible outcomes, Go has more than 10 to the power of 80 possible outcomes. AlphaGo is trained to analyze situations itself by breaking the game down into tiny parts and visualizing all possible moves. Last week, it played the world's best Go player, 19-year-old Kojir. With the help of a human handler, AlphaGo beat him 3 times, and after doing what it was designed to do, retired from the game.
Okay, so that sets the stage for what people are doing with AI. The next part, which is much shorter, is what I want everyone to hear.
If a system like AlphaGo can learn all the moves in Go well enough to beat a person, then it has the potential to replace lawyers and accountants, among dozens of other jobs.
Okay, so what they just said was the potential to replace lawyers and accountants among dozens of other jobs. So hard for us to comprehend that they could actually replace us, but people are working on it, right? People are working on replacing as many jobs as they can. Now, I truly don't believe that any of those jobs are going to go away, including our own, but they are going to shift. They are going to change. There are going to be new roles that we play within our current field of technology. So we must adapt. And in order to adapt, let's compare and contrast what I would call the old world IT versus the new world IT. And this is the basic that we've touted, people have talked about for years. This is really kind of old, reactive, proactive. What I would say is I've seen, and this was mentioned in the talk earlier about security, is we do have to be more proactive around security because we don't want to be caught standing still, flat-footed, saying, oh, well, it's never happened before. We have to be prepared for it. Manual versus automated. I touched on this a little bit, but this is something else where you really got to start thinking about what can I automate? What can I make routine, more consistent over and over again? And I recently read in the Wall Street Journal this call out talking about Facebook's move to use AI to monitor content that should be taken down, right? So Facebook has a team. Is anyone here from Facebook? No? Okay. So to be clear, because I believe everything I read on Twitter, I'm pretty sure this is fake news. So I'm not going to go into what Facebook is actually doing, and the Wall Street Journal, I believe, is a viable resource. But the point being, the point that really drew my attention is a growing willingness to trust machines. This is something that I see over and over when I talk to people about automation, is there's pushback. In fact, I recently talked to a potential customer in Chicago last week from a very large company, and they said they didn't feel comfortable putting an agent on their machines. They didn't feel comfortable. And I was kind of blown away by that because I'm like, but the opposite is not doing anything and you feel comfortable with that? That was pretty crazy. But the way I look at it is I've spent the last 10 years working on automation, so I'm deep in the water and I'm enjoying it and I feel comfortable, but there's still a lot of people on shore who are looking at that water as kind of scary. They don't know if they can swim, they don't know if there's anything lurking in the water. So I get it that it takes some communication to get people sometimes to jump into that pool of water. They have to wade into it, which, to be fair, I waded in over the last 10 years and will continue to wade in. But if you're behind, if you're standing on shore, you got to start thinking about getting into that deep pool of water. I think also we have to start thinking strategic versus transactional. And that's just a mindset, like, not just what do I need to do right now, but what do I need to do in the future to be more efficient. And then this is one that sounds very similar, informational versus educational, but I feel that in the IT world, we are often informational in the sense that we have tons of information. We can give it to you, and we expect you, the reader, to read it and understand it. We're not really educating. We need to start educating. I hear my own team sometimes say, well, if the client had only read the email I sent them, they would be fine, right? But they're not, they know it, but the client doesn't have time to read the email. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but they truly, you send them a long email, they just look at it as a big bunch of words, and they're like, I don't have time for that. So you have to think of more creative ways to educate your customers, because people learn in different ways, and they don't all learn like we learn. These last two I'm going to bundle together, and I'm going to play another quick video that talks about this. Arrogant versus humble, and talker versus listener. And there's a good reason why we should all be aware of this, and it's called the paradox of expertise. And I don't know, has anyone heard of this? I think we all could potentially fall into this if we're not careful. So I'm going to play two videos. The first one is going to set the stage as to who this guy is, and the second is going to explain why I'm talking about the paradox of expertise.
Can take the insights from
Dr. Jason Matheny used to work at the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford. He once wrote a paper titled Reducing the Risk of Human Extinction. Now he runs IARPA. IARPA's budget is classified. A lot about IARPA is classified. We're not allowed to show you any part of the building aside from one windowless room. You're not missing much.
Okay, has anyone ever heard of IARPA? It's not a lowercase I, so that's probably why we haven't heard of it. I just learned about it myself in doing the research for this talk, and it's a pretty badass office, if you ask me. Sounds pretty cool. In fact, what they say on their website is what I put up there. And all you need to know in this next clip is that they had a project where they ask experts and non-experts, really anyone, to participate in predicting some type of future event. And they found a woman who was not an expert in anything they were researching, and all she had was her brain and the internet, Google, and she was much better than all of the experts. So here's what they say about that.
It seems kind of hard to believe that a regular person with a few Google searches could be a better predictor than a subject matter expert.
Yeah, it is. It's really counterintuitive. I think this gets to what's sometimes called the paradox of expertise, in which experts start to get blinders on so that they're only looking at the same sources of data. They're only going with the same mental models or hypotheses that they've already generated about the world. People who are most accurate not only tended to be deeply self-critical and humble about what they knew, they didn't trust their instincts much. That's not a trait that most of us have.
Yeah, I would agree. That's not a trait that most of us have. Has anyone here ran into an issue where the customer actually solved the problem before you did? Because I know I have. I had my blinders on. I started thinking like much deeper than I needed to. And they're like, oh, why don't we just do this? Oh, yeah, right. That fixed it. Has anyone here tried to convince a network engineer that it's not a Mac problem? I'd say they've got their blinders on. I'd say they're adamant that they know what they're talking about because they're not being self-critical and they're not being humble. So I run into that, I'm sure all of us do, and I would just encourage everyone here to avoid falling into that trap. Good thing to keep in mind. So let's talk about some examples, real-world examples, not just within IT, but outside of IT, of kind of what I'm talking about here. The first one is a client of ours called Egg Strategy. And I love this example because it's very simple, it's very basic, but it's also, to me, a bit counterintuitive, but it worked. Egg Strategy, let me back up a little bit. Office communication. Egg Strategy has about 75 people. 75 people in 2 offices, actually. I work with a lot of clients, big, small, corporate. They may have a team of only 5. Have you seen teams as small as 5 in the same office, in the same room, who can't communicate with each other? Right? Like you talk to one person, and then suddenly you have to say it 4 more times because they have no way of talking to each other. That's incredibly frustrating. Well, Egg Strategy is really good at communicating. And they've got 2 offices and 75 people. So I'm thinking, what are they doing differently than these small offices? And they even have remote users, you know. So what are they doing differently? And this is unscientific. But I do notice that the smaller companies tend to rely a lot on email. It's like you can never get a hold of them. You're having these very long email exchanges, but you're never actually, rarely, picking up the phone unless they have a serious problem. And in-person meetings are pretty rare. Now, Egg Strategy, on the other hand, they prioritize in-person. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And they also do a lot of video calling, which for me was at first a bit awkward because I would have video calls with them. And I wasn't really comfortable with video calls. But now I'm to the point, because of Egg Strategy, where if I don't have a video call, I feel a bit hamstringed. Like, well, I'm on the phone, but I can't really see what you're saying. So I'm starting to buy into this whole idea of video calling as a step up from phone calls. So this is how I believe they prioritize. And of course, they use instant messaging. And of course, they still use email. But one of the things when we first met them is they have offices in Chicago and Boulder. And that's about a 2.5-hour flight. And then, of course, you got a couple hours at each end to get to the airport, to get through security, things like that. So they're truly separate. And when we met them, they had 2 completely different IT structures. In fact, they had 2 completely different cultures. They had the Boulder culture with Boulder IT, and they had the Chicago culture with Chicago IT. And they wanted us to unify their IT. And that's, as we all know, relatively easy. We can unify IT. But they did something else that I think was critical to making that a success. And that is they also worked to unify their culture, because they did have 2 different cultures. They had an us versus them mentality. And so they hired a new operations manager, and he spent about 6 months working 1 week in Chicago and then 1 week in Boulder, traveling back and forth. Week here, week there, week here, week there. So that's a lot of traveling, that's a lot of time. Now, my initial reaction to that is, that seems like a waste. Like, you take a half day every week to travel, full day if you include return trip. What are you doing there you couldn't do with a phone call or video? Like, what are you really doing? But that really was essential. Like, to have that FaceTime, to have that communication, to have those conversations. When he heard people say, oh, well, Chicago does it that way, not us. Wait. We're all the same team. We have to work together. So I think if he had not done that, we would have been struggling, because we would have said, okay, here's your new IT. And one or the other would have said, well, we don't do it that way. They do it that way. We don't do it that way. But together, with the face-to-face and the IT, we were able to bridge that gap. And I really do feel that they are one company, and they communicate much better than these small companies, you know, in the same room. So that was a success. Now, my next example, and I've got 3. My next example is a guy I know called Justin Ahrens of Rule 29. It's a design company. And I call him Mr. Do-It-All because he runs a business, he produces podcasts, he writes, he speaks at events, he gives back by volunteering and raising money for important causes. So I wanted to sit down with him and figure out how he gets so much done. And to be clear, there's no secret to how he gets so much done. He just works hard and does it. But there was a recurring theme, and that was his attitude. His attitude towards his employees, his attitude towards his clients, his attitude towards life, really. And he said to me, I should listen to this Brene Brown talk where she says, assume people are doing the best they can. Just take that attitude of assuming. When people call you with your first thought is the most ridiculous question ever. Assume that they are doing the best they can. And it reminds me of the Genius Bar training. I was not a genius at Apple, but I've hired several, I like to call them former geniuses, from Apple. And they have an attitude of assume positive intent, right? There's nothing, just take that assumption. There's nothing malicious here. Assume positive intent and help the person at the bar. So I went looking for this Brene Brown quote, and I found this video. This is the last video I'm going to play. It's a bit longer than the others. It's maybe 2.5 minutes. And it's a bit outside the realm of IT, but I'm going to bring it back to IT. So please have an open mind. Here it is.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay, so to be clear, I'm not recommending you go out and start hugging your clients, right? Sorry. I thought I should play through the credits just to give credit where credit is due. For those of you who maybe weren't paying attention, I kind of equate the old school and the new school. And like I said, I'm not recommending you go out and start hugging your clients. But the idea is because people remember how we made them feel, we do have to start thinking about how we approach people. And my last example, I think, summarizes this really well. And some of you may know Chip Pearson from Jamf. I've known Chip for several years, and he gave me permission to talk about him here. Chip, I think, has done a really great job of building a culture at Jamf that really puts people first. And I recently listened to the Mac Admin podcast, featuring Chip, number 35, popped up there. And Chip said, I'm going to read the full quote, "It's more about the people than the technology. We get wrapped up in the tech and forget the tech is for people to use. And some of you, if you don't know Chip, might think, oh, that's just corporate, BS. But if you know Chip, I think you know that that's authentic. And because he's taken that attitude and he's instilled that at Jamf, I mean, we've worked for years at Jamf, and there are some things that frustrate us about, things they're not doing or delays, but it's a great company to interact with, and so we're okay with it. Across the river, I won't name any names, but there's another company who has a great product. They are so frustrating to work with, so frustrating. And in fact, if they had a better product out there, I would switch in a heartbeat. That's how frustrating they are. So when it comes down to the person who knows it all but is not so easy to work with versus the person who maybe doesn't know so much but is really easy to work with, I will always choose the person that's easier to work with. I will always hire the person that's easier to work with because they can learn the tech, but it's really hard to learn some of this more people-friendly stuff. So if we were to spin this back around and take another look at Beth, obviously we would want to have some clear understanding, not confusion. We would want to include people in our conversations, not exclude them. We would want to engage people. And believe me, some people, they won't engage in return, right? So we can only do what we can do. We can be the ones to reach out. We used to complain in our office like, oh, geez, terrible client, terrible client. And then we took the attitude of, no, we're just not doing a good job of engaging them. So we need to change our attitude and reach out to them in a different way. Part of the conversation, feeling equal, and obviously, 100% squanchy. So in summary, how do we make squanch happen? As I've said earlier, learning tech, relatively easy. Learning to improve how to communicate is hard for me, but we can all do it. There are resources out there, and it's not a one-time thing. It's ongoing. So use your knowledge of tech to help people. And when you have those hard decisions, like you're not sure what to do, put that in your mind. And there are 3 things that we can focus on. People over technology, take that attitude with you. People are doing the best they can. Become a humble listener. That's hard for a lot of us who know a lot of things to be a humble listener, but we can all work on that. And then think educational. And that's something I still haven't quite figured out. Like, it's easy for me to dump a lot of information on someone, but it is a lot more work to be educational. So I think that's something we all need to figure out. How can we help take what we know and help people with technology? With that, thank you very much. I hope you got something out of this talk.